My mother-in-law, Nancy, always called my newborn son as precious as apple pie. She adored him and took great care of him while I was at work. At the time, I didn't realize how overwhelming her attention was. My name is Emily and I'm 28 years old. I work full-time and married my husband, Liam, a year ago. After we got married, we moved in with his parents. I was nervous about it, but our relationship was okay. Nancy helped with chores since both Liam and I were busy. However, Nancy constantly asked us about having a baby. She would say things like, "It's been a year since you got married. Aren't you planning to have children yet? You're not getting any younger." Her daily comments were stressful for me. I wanted children, but I also wanted to focus on my career and ensure we had enough financial stability first. Nancy's constant questions about grandchildren were becoming a problem. One night, after Nancy went to bed, I talked to Liam about it. I told him her remarks were putting a lot of pressure on me. Liam was surprised and promised to talk to his mom. Then, Liam suggested we consider having a baby, not because of his mom's pressure, but because he was getting a promotion and a raise. With a better salary, it might be a good time to start a family while I was still young. Liam wasn't pressuring me, but he wanted me to think about having a baby, especially since his salary was going to increase. I agreed to consider it, but asked him to talk to Nancy about easing up on the pressure. A few days later, Liam spoke to his mom, and thankfully, her constant comments stopped. After that, I felt less stressed and was more open to the idea of having a baby. We decided to wait for Liam's promotion to be finalized before trying. Half a year later, everything fell into place and I found out I was pregnant. We were thrilled, and Nancy was especially excited. She had been eagerly waiting to become a grandmother and was always checking up on me. As the months went by, I began to enjoy interacting with Nancy more, even though her initial pressure had been overwhelming. When the day of my delivery arrived, I was nervous but supported by Liam and Nancy. I successfully gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom we named Jackson. Holding Jackson for the first time was an indescribable joy. After the delivery, I took parental leave to care for him. As a first-time mom, it was challenging, but the happiness of having Jackson made it all worthwhile. Time flew by, and soon Jackson was nearly a year old, and my parental leave was ending. I planned to return to work, but we faced a problem finding a childcare center. I knew there was a shortage, but it was harder to find one than I had expected. Liam and I were unsure about what to do. Eventually, I decided to extend my parental leave because we still couldn't find a childcare center. Jackson continued to grow, and by the time he was almost 2, I planned to return to work. Nancy offered to take care of Jackson, which was a huge relief. She said, "You don't want to quit your job, do you, Emily? I'm always home anyway, so don't hesitate to leave him with me. I'll be bored if I'm alone." Her offer was a lifesaver. Liam and I planned to enroll Jackson in preschool when he turned 3, as there seemed to be enough openings at nearby kindergartens. We decided to manage for another year with Nancy's help. For the past 2 years, Nancy had been taking care of Jackson, and we trusted her completely. Thanks to her, I was able to return to work successfully. Everything was going well until a year later, as Jackson approached his 3rd birthday. I noticed something troubling. He seemed distant and less excited to see me. He was always with Nancy and didn't want to be close to me. I thought maybe he was too attached to Nancy since she looked after him, but I tried my best to connect with him. Then something even more concerning happened. Jackson stopped speaking almost entirely. He had been very chatty before, but now it was like he was a different person. I worried if it was because I was working and he felt lonely, or if something was wrong with him. Liam also noticed something was off, so we decided to take Jackson to the hospital. However, Nancy strongly opposed this, saying, "A hospital? Jackson is fine, he's a good boy. I'm looking after him, so trust me. Don't label him as sick." Nancy was extremely frantic about us taking Jackson to the hospital, which made me suspicious. If she truly thought something was wrong with Jackson, she should have been eager to get him checked out. Her strong opposition made me distrustful of her. Liam also felt uneasy about Nancy's behavior. One night, after she went to bed, he said, "Do you really think nothing is wrong with Jackson? Mom insists he's fine, but I think we should get him checked out." I agreed with Liam. Our once chatty son had become very quiet, and no matter how much Nancy reassured us, we couldn't ignore it. We decided to take Jackson to the hospital right away. A few days later, Liam took time off work to go with me, and we headed to the hospital. Nancy was unhappy and even said, "I told you he's fine. This is a wild goose chase." She wanted to come with us, but Liam thought it was best if just the 2 of us took Jackson. Ignoring Nancy's irritation, we went to the hospital. Our main focus was Jackson, not her. During the trip, Jackson remained silent despite our attempts to cheer him up. We exchanged worried glances, fearing something might be wrong. At the hospital, Jackson underwent a series of tests. Liam and I anxiously waited for the doctor's diagnosis, ready to accept any result calmly. To our surprise, the doctor found no physical issues with Jackson. We felt relieved but puzzled about his drastic change. The doctor suggested it might be psychological. On the way home, we discussed what this could mean, but we didn't have any clear answers. When we got home, Nancy, as if waiting for us, asked about the test results. When we told her there were no physical problems, she triumphantly said, "See, I told you so." We decided not to mention the psychological aspect, knowing she would likely make a fuss. From then on, Liam and I paid more attention to Jackson. I started coming home from work earlier, and Liam tried to talk to Jackson more and even shared baths with him. Gradually, Jackson started to change. He still didn't talk much, but he began to smile at me like he used to. We reflected on our behavior and considered that we might have made him feel lonely. I even thought about quitting my job. One day after work, I came home to find Jackson eagerly waiting to greet me, which was rare and made me happy. As I was about to change clothes, Nancy stopped me and said she needed to discuss something. She calmly asked if I had said anything to Jackson, mentioning his recent defiant attitude towards her. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, which made me uneasy. I told her I hadn't said anything, but she grew angry, saying Jackson was rebelling against her despite her care. Her reaction intensified my mistrust of her. I started questioning if leaving Jackson with her had been a mistake. While I didn't see any unusual behavior from her at home, I still felt uneasy. Determined to find out the truth, I secretly set up an old voice recorder in the living room the next morning. I didn't feel good about spying but decided to keep it a secret from Liam, unsure of how he would react. I kept my plan to monitor my mother-in-law a secret from her. The next day after work, I retrieved the recorder from the living room and listened to it in our bedroom. What I heard was shocking. My hand shook with anger as I listened. I was furious at my mother-in-law and at myself for not noticing this earlier. I pulled myself together and called my husband, asking him to come home as soon as possible. I was thinking about leaving the house with our son. I apologized for recording without permission, sent him a message with the audio file, and quickly went back to the living room. I picked up my son and took him to the bedroom. My mother-in-law looked annoyed but said nothing. As I put Jackson to sleep, I waited for my husband. When he arrived, I heard him yelling from the living room. I rushed out quietly so I wouldn't wake Jackson. "What's going on?" I asked as I joined my husband and saw my mother-in-law looking shocked by his anger. I tried to calm my husband, reminding him that Jackson was asleep. He took a deep breath and asked my mother-in-law to sit down. I placed the recorder in front of her and explained, "We recorded you while you were alone with Jackson. Can you explain this to us?" I played the recording. Hearing the things my mother-in-law said to Jackson was painful. She had been telling him to call her mom and not to get close to me, his actual mother. She even told him not to welcome me home when I returned. My husband and I listened silently, letting her hear her own words. When I first heard the recording, I was shocked, and it made sense why our son had been acting strangely. My mother-in-law was talking about Emily Wright, which confused me. What did she mean by saying Emily wasn't his real mother? My husband, calm but angry, confronted his mother. My mother-in-law tried to excuse her actions by saying it was just a game to make things fun for Jackson, but that made no sense to me. It seemed like she was trying to make our son believe that Emily was not his real mother. I told my husband that my mother-in-law's excuse was ridiculous and that our son wasn't acting abnormally. He was just trying to be close to his real mother. My husband, usually mild-mannered, was stern and demanded an explanation from his mother. She fell silent, and no matter what we said, she just looked down and didn't respond. Finally, my husband lost his patience, slammed the table, and said we would be leaving the house. My mother-in-law was shocked and quickly tried to apologize, realizing she might lose not just her grandson but also her financial support from us. I was furious with her. Her apologies felt hollow. We had been covering most of her expenses, and now she was only sorry because her situation was at risk. I felt deep contempt for her. My husband and I were upset, thinking about how our son must have felt. We decided to leave immediately. We packed our things, took our sleeping son, and left the house. My husband apologized to me for his mother's behavior, but I couldn't blame her alone. We should have noticed the problem sooner. We decided to cut ties with my mother-in-law because the situation was harming our son. We took a cab to my parents' house, where they welcomed us warmly. My husband apologized to Jackson for his grandmother's behavior and tried to understand how he felt, but our son remained silent. We decided to give Jackson some time to heal and start talking when he was ready. For now, we wanted to keep him calm and were considering counseling for him. I told Jackson that from now on it would just be the three of us, Mom, Dad, and him, and he wouldn't have to worry about anything else. My husband gently patted Jackson's head as he spoke. In a soft voice, Jackson said, "I don't like Grandma." I was surprised and asked if he could talk. My husband and I were holding back tears as we waited for him to share more. Once we told Jackson he wouldn't be living with his grandmother anymore, he started to open up. He told us he was scared of Grandma's anger if he didn't treat her like his mother. She had told him that I was bad and he should stay away from me. He felt confused because he loved both me and his dad and didn't know what to do. Hearing this, I regretted not noticing the problem sooner and only focusing on work. My husband and I apologized to Jackson, assuring him that it would be just the three of us from now on. We tried our best to show him how much we loved him. While we looked for a new home, we stayed at my parents' house. Without Grandma around, Jackson slowly started to become his cheerful self again and even spoke to me normally. Every day, my husband received messages from his mother begging him to come back home, but he didn't respond. I blocked her messages to avoid dealing with her. Recently, my husband went to his parents' house alone to collect our things. He ignored his mother completely, who cried loudly. Even though I saw my mother-in-law upset, I felt no sympathy. The only family I'm focused on protecting now is Emily and Jackson. I can't stand anyone hurting my family, even if it's their own grandparents. That's what my husband said about his mother. I'm so thankful to him for acting quickly to protect our son. Living with my beloved family now is the greatest happiness for me. I do feel a bit sorry for my mother-in-law who lost everything in the process. Eventually, my husband cut off all contact with his mother, and we moved to a new home. We've arranged to get updates from a relative about her. This relative says she's very depressed and spends all her time crying alone in her big house without going out. Meanwhile, we've settled into a safe condominium and started a new chapter. I quit my job to spend more time with our son, and my husband and I are working hard to support his mental health. Our son is back to being his energetic self, and even when he's a handful, I find it endearing. I'm committed to watching over my husband and son to make sure our son never has to face anything tough again, because that's what makes us truly happy.